My fellow Americans, let us journey together into a moment of rare confrontation, where the pillars of power met not in whispered negotiations or backroom handshakes, but face to face, in the concrete and steel bones of one of our nation's financial citadels. On the grounds of the United States Federal Reserve, under scaffolding and surrounded by renovations that stretch both imagination and budget, two titans of American governance stood shoulder to shoulder, yet worlds apart. President Donald J. Trump, the outsider who made the presidency his proving ground, arrived not with quiet observation but with pointed questions. Dressed in a white hard hat, tailored suit, and the unmistakable confidence of a man who's faced scrutiny and storm alike, he entered the construction zone not merely to survey progress, but to press for answers. Beside him stood Jerome Powell, chairman of the Federal Reserve, stoic, calculated, and resolute. His role, not defined by spectacle but by stability, found itself tested, not by economic headwinds but by a president's scrutiny. The Fed's headquarters, a historic monument to monetary policy, has become more than a renovation site. It has become a symbol of friction, of oversight, of clashing interpretations and contested figures. A price tag that began at $2.5 billion now appears as a moving target, depending on who you ask. Trump had come armed, not with anger, but with numbers. With figures, with paperwork, with questions that simmered beyond fiscal responsibility. It went up a little bit, or a lot, he remarked casually, though the weight of his tone cut through the air like the roar of machinery above them. And yet Powell did not flinch. He didn't defer. In a moment televised by a handful of stunned pool reporters, the chairman corrected the commander-in-chief. "I'm not aware of that, Mr. President," he replied evenly. "I've not heard about that from anyone at the Fed." The disagreement, small to some, seismic to others, unfolded not behind closed doors, but within arm's length of construction workers, engineers, and aides. When Trump handed Powell a sheet of paper, likely the president's own source of the $3.1 billion figure, the chairman glanced, paused, then offered clarity. He explained that the numbers the president held also included the completed renovations of the Martin Federal Building, finalized in 2020. It was a moment of fact-checking, not of hostility, but of divergence. But even amid the dissonance, a subtle shift occurred. Trump, who once floated removing Powell over various disputes, chose restraint. Chose patience. Chose to preserve rather than to purge. "I don't think it's necessary," the president later told reporters, brushing off earlier threats to fire the Fed chief. "I think it was productive. That, perhaps, is the heart of this exchange. Not the numbers, not the budget sheets, but the decision not to escalate." For in this era of political polarization and media frenzy, a disagreement resolved without chaos is its own quiet headline. Still, the tour was no walk in the park. Trump and several of his economic advisors had grown increasingly agitated by reports of spiraling costs. Leaks from the West Wing suggested concerns over transparency, over potential fraud, over whether oversight had been drowned in bureaucracy. Powell, however, remained adamant. The cost, he said, had risen within expected ranges. Materials, labor, and historic preservation do not come cheaply, particularly in the capital's most scrutinized corridors. Trump's allies whispered privately that they had hoped to catch Powell in a misstep. Instead, they found a man unwilling to bend to pressure, unwilling to spin numbers, unwilling to paint the Fed's walls with political compromise. The tension hung thick. Even as the tour continued, past marble staircases, torn down walls, and exposed beams. Both men pointed to blueprints, commented on architectural renderings, and discussed timelines. But beneath each comment was another dialogue, the kind that doesn't need microphones to echo. This wasn't merely about steel and stone. It was about control. About who gets to define truth. About whether Washington's institutions belong to appointed technocrats or elected disruptors. To many onlookers, the confrontation was a battle of styles, Trump's brash populism versus Powell's institutional calm. But to those paying closer attention, it was a reflection of something deeper, a nation grappling with accountability in an era where every dollar, every decision, becomes a political weapon. Even as the hard hats came off, the debate did not. Trump, before stepping into his motorcade, reiterated his concerns about the cost, about the process. "This is taxpayer money," he said. "We need answers." Powell offered no retort, only facts, only documentation. Only the weight of bureaucratic procedure in contrast with the urgency of populist inquiry. In the hours that followed, networks buzzed with speculation. Was Trump preparing to fire Powell after all? Was this merely a staged show for the cameras? Was the chairman caught off guard? Or had he delivered a silent rebuke? Yet, the president's own words dispelled the more dramatic assumptions. I don't think it's necessary, he repeated once more. I want accountability, but I also want progress. And therein lies the tension that defines our times. Between those demanding immediate answers and those tasked with long-term stewardship. Between the urgency of democracy and the slow pulse of governance. This was not just a tour, it was a confrontation of philosophies. A billionaire president who views construction as second nature, questioning a banker who views stability as sacred. One thinking in terms of optics, the other in terms of outcomes. In that interaction, Americans glimpsed more than disagreement. They witnessed the fraying seams between leadership and oversight, between fiscal skepticism and bureaucratic defense. But for all the noise, for all the flashing headlines, one truth emerged: accountability, though often uncomfortable, is still alive. Still argued. Still walked through, room by room, blueprint by blueprint. Perhaps that is what this moment was all about. Not a clash of egos. Not a simple budget spat. But a reminder that even at the highest levels, disagreement can spark dialogue. Dispute can foster disclosure. And sometimes, even in Washington, scrutiny can coexist with civility. So let the hammers continue to fall. Let the walls rise. Let the Fed's headquarters stand tall again, not just as a physical structure, but as a monument to what happens when power, politics, and principle collide in open air. And let us remember this: in a nation founded on debate, even the sharpest confrontations can illuminate more than they divide.